Ethan Walker had lived in Flagstaff long enough to recognize every crack in the sidewalks, every humming streetlight, every rusted mailbox on his route home. After losing his wife, the town felt emptier, almost hollow, but he stayed because it held the last pieces of her. Her favorite diner, the shop where she'd buy paintbrushes, the hill where they once watched fireworks. His days blended together into a quiet routine. Wake up, fix engines, close the shop, return to silence. He had grown used to loneliness, almost accepting it as a permanent companion. That afternoon, the sun glared sharply against the sand-colored highway, shimmering like a sheet of metal. Ethan was tired, thinking only of a cold drink and a quiet evening, when a strange shape caught his attention. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a stray dog seeking shade, but something about the stillness felt wrong. Curious and uneasy, he slowed his truck and stepped out, boots crunching against dry gravel. As he walked closer, the shape became clearer, resolving into the small, curled form of a child. The sight stopped him cold. A tiny girl lay beneath a dead tree, her knees tucked to her chest as if she were trying to disappear into the earth. Her skin was pale from dehydration, and her clothes were covered in dust and torn at the edges. Her hair was tangled, sticking to her forehead in clumps. For a heartbeat, Ethan felt the world tilt. Memories of his wife's gentle touch and the way she always protected children rushed into his mind, tightening his chest with ache and urgency. He crouched beside the child, speaking softly so he wouldn't scare her. She flinched at the sound of his voice but didn't run. Up close, the depth of her suffering became painfully clear. Her cheeks were sunken, her lips cracked, and her eyes wide with fear. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Ethan offered his water bottle, and her tiny hands trembled as she reached for it. She drank in small, desperate sips, as if afraid the water might disappear. Realizing she couldn't stay there another minute, Ethan slid his arms gently beneath her, half expecting her to resist. Instead, she clung weakly to his shirt, as though she had finally found something familiar, kindness. He carried her to the truck and set her on the passenger seat, buckling the belt over her like she was made of glass. As he started the engine, he kept glancing at her, making sure she was still breathing, still conscious. Each shallow breath from her made his stomach twist. Back at his home, an old, creaking house his wife once filled with humming, laughter, and the smell of cinnamon, Ethan hurried inside with the girl. He warmed soup, brought clean towels, and searched the closets for blankets. The house felt alive again in a strange, unexpected way. Watching her sit at the kitchen table, fragile and silent, stirred something protective in him. He placed a bowl of soup in front of her. She hesitated at first, as if unsure she was allowed to eat, then slowly, cautiously, began taking small bites. After she finished eating, Ethan offered her a blanket and guided her to the sofa. She sat with perfect stillness, as though movement might cause her to vanish. Her eyes followed him with cautious curiosity. When he finally asked for her name, she whispered it so softly he almost didn't hear. Ayanna. The name floated through the room like a fragile feather. Ethan nodded, repeating it gently so she knew he had heard her. The sound of her name seemed to comfort her, her shoulders eased ever so slightly. As the evening settled in, Ayanna wandered around the house with slow steps. She touched the corners of picture frames, inspected Ethan's tools, and paused at a photo of Ethan and his late wife. Her fingertips lingered on the glass, and she looked back at Ethan with an expression he couldn't decipher, curiosity, sympathy, maybe recognition of pain. Ethan felt a lump form in his throat but forced a small smile. He didn't want his grief to frighten her. Instead, he kept his voice steady, telling her she was safe now. Night brought a quiet Ethan wasn't used to, not empty silence, but gentle presence. Ayanna wrapped herself in the blanket and fell asleep on the sofa, small hands curled near her face. Ethan sat nearby, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. He wondered where she had come from, why she had been alone, and who might be searching for her. The reservation wasn't far, but children didn't wander that deep into the desert without a reason. He promised himself he would find answers, but not tonight. Tonight, she just needed rest. When dawn arrived, Ethan's world looked different. Ayanna followed him everywhere, into the garage, across the yard, even to the mailbox. She didn't talk, but her presence was constant and gentle. She sat on a stool while he repaired a customer's engine, watching with wide, observant eyes. Sometimes she would hand him a wrench without him asking, almost as if she sensed what he needed. Ethan felt a strange comfort in her company, a quiet bond forming between two souls who knew the taste of loss. 4 days passed in this new rhythm, both peaceful and unsettling. Each morning, Ethan found Ayanna already awake, sitting quietly at the kitchen window as the desert sun rose. She never complained, never asked for anything, but her silence weighed heavily, like she was carrying a story too painful to speak. Ethan wished he could reach her, reassure her. But on the 4th morning, just as he finished his coffee, a thunderous knock hammered the front door, so loud it rattled the windows. Ayanna stiffened instantly, fear flashing across her face, and Ethan's heart lurched as he walked toward the door, unaware that the moment he opened it, everything in his life was about to change. For the next 4 days, Ayanna moved through Ethan's home like a small, silent shadow. She watched him repair engines with fascination, her eyes following every movement of his hands. She sat on the garage floor, legs crossed, passing him tools without being asked, as though she'd memorized his routine. At mealtimes, she ate quietly and neatly, always leaving food for later as if she feared scarcity. At night, she slept curled under the same blanket he'd given her the first day. Though she spoke very little, her presence softened the house's emptiness in a way that surprised Ethan. On the 4th morning, the sun had barely risen when a deep, violent pounding erupted at the front door. Thud, 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 the sound echoed through the small house and vibrated through the walls. Ethan's mug slipped from his hand and clattered onto the counter, spilling coffee everywhere. Ayanna froze at the kitchen table, her eyes widening in fear, not confusion, fear, as if she already knew who stood outside. Ethan wiped his hands on a towel, heart racing. Whoever was knocking wasn't a visitor, they were a demand. When he opened the door, he felt the air thicken with tension. 3 Apache women stood on his porch, framed by the rising desert light like figures carved from ancient stone. The eldest had long silver hair braided tightly down her back, her eyes sharp and unwavering, holding a lifetime of storms behind them. Beside her stood a tall, powerful woman with braided hair marked by tribal patterns painted across her cheeks. The youngest clutched a ceremonial pouch, her expression conflicted, anger mixed with fear, grief mixed with hope. Their presence felt heavy, purposeful, like they had come not just for answers, but for judgment. The eldest woman stepped forward, her posture strong, her chin lifted with authority. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and resonant, each word carrying weight. "You have something that belongs to us," she said. It wasn't a question, it wasn't an accusation, it was a statement of fact, one that cut through the morning air like a blade. Ethan's pulse throbbed in his ears as he swallowed hard. Behind him, Ayanna peeked from the hallway, half hidden behind the doorframe. The moment her face emerged into view, all 3 women inhaled sharply at the same time. Their expressions hardened in an instant. The tall warrior-like woman took one step forward as though drawn by instinct. The young woman with the ceremonial pouch pressed it tightly to her chest, her eyes filling with emotion as she whispered something in Apache that Ethan didn't understand. The eldest woman's eyes glistened with recognition and sorrow. Ethan stepped slightly in front of Ayanna, not to challenge the women, but to protect the terrified child behind him. "I found her alone in the desert," he said, voice trembling but honest. "She was starving. She was barely conscious. I didn't know who she belonged to." His words seemed to hang in the air for several seconds. The eldest woman studied him, really studied him, like she was searching his face for truth, intention, and perhaps something else. The tension between the doorway and the desert air pressed down on all of them. The young woman clutching the pouch stepped closer, tears welling in her eyes. When she spoke, her voice cracked with emotion. "We searched for her for 6 days, she said shakily. "We thought she was gone. We thought the desert took her." Ayanna stepped forward too, hesitant, frightened, but drawn by the sound of the woman's voice. Ethan's heart twisted as he realized the young woman wasn't just a villager, she was someone tied to Ayanna by blood. The way she trembled at the sight of the child made it unmistakable. The tall warrior woman finally spoke, her voice deeper, edged with both anger and pain. "She wandered away from our ceremony grounds," she said. "A storm came. She disappeared." Her fists tightened at her sides, Guilt flickered across her expression. We failed to protect her. Ayanna's small hand reached for Ethan's sleeve, gripping it lightly, seeking reassurance. Ethan gently squeezed her hand back. He didn't know what her life had been like before, but he could sense fear in her trembling body, fear not of these women, but of being taken away from the safety she had found. The eldest woman finally softened, her stern features melting into a sorrowful, almost grateful expression. She knelt down slowly, lowering herself to Ayanna's eye level. Her voice changed too, becoming gentler, like a grandmother soothing a frightened child. "Little one," she whispered, "you are safe now." But Ayanna didn't move from behind Ethan's leg. She clung tighter instead. The sight made all three women look at Ethan with a new kind of respect, as if they understood the care he had shown her during the days she'd been lost. Ethan felt his throat tighten. He didn't want to lose her so suddenly. He had no right to keep her, but the idea of handing her over, this small, silent girl who had filled his home with life, felt like losing someone precious all over again. "If she wants to go with you, I won't stop her," he said softly. His voice cracked with emotion he tried to hide. Ayanna shook her head quickly, a silent plea. She pressed closer to him, her eyes shimmering with fear and attachment. The women noticed her reaction, and something shifted among them. The youngest woman stepped forward with slow, careful movements, then opened the small ceremonial pouch. Inside was a woven bracelet, small, delicate, handmade. She held it out to Ayanna with trembling hands. "For you," she whispered. Ayanna hesitated, then slowly reached out and took it. Her eyes softened. The woman smiled through tears. Then she looked up at Ethan and said, "She trusts you. She feels safe with you." The eldest woman stood again, her eyes now warm but serious. "We need to speak," she said quietly. "About her, about you, and about what comes next."